What's going on, y'all? This podcast is brought to you by Modern Roots Life. Modern Roots Life is a Christian-owned and operated company, and it's bringing real health back to its roots. They offer powerful, all-natural health supplements such as beef liver, cod liver oil, beef tallow, magnesium, and mineral-rich salts, all sourced the way God intended. Clean, simple, and from the earth. So whether you're looking to boost your energy, restore mineral balance, or just fuel your family with real nourishment, Modern Roots Life has got you covered. Guys, in this community, we're trying to get healthy in our mind, in our body, and our spirit. So don't neglect your health. If you want more information, check out modernrootslife.com and check the link in my description. You know, people often ask me how they can support me. Well, I think it's pretty cool if you can support me by supporting the people who support me, and you get something in return. And being healthy is a pretty good return. What's going on, family? Welcome back to the Ancient Roots of Life and Wellness podcast. Once again, I'm your host, JT, and my co-host, as always, is Josh Truex of Modern Roots Life. What's going on, Josh?
Hey, brother. How are you? Good to see you. Nice to be. I'm always very thankful to be here.
Yeah, man, I'm excited. I think we are going to tease that we're going to talk about, well, maybe we're going to do a study, and maybe it's going to be a multi-part episode where we're going to talk about the Book of Enoch, and we're going to kind of go through some of it. So I know I guess you've been rereading it, and you've had a lot of things on your heart and your mind about it.
I've yet to read it since even thinking about the little season stuff and everything like that. So I think the last time I was getting into it was pretty hard, or pretty deep into it was when I was doing a lot of calendar studies and stuff like that. From chapter. So I stayed in like chapter 72, 73 all the way on for many months doing that with our study group that we were doing. But other than that, I haven't, and going back through it's been a real blessing. I have a few different versions of it here, but the one that is my favorite, and I think most people don't really know, is that Ethiopic Ge'ez. And the Ge'ez is like the Ethiopian ancient, whatever they call it. It's funny because the modern Ethiopic is called Amharic, and it's almost like Aramaic. And,
That's what
like,
their language is called?
now, yeah, it's like basically like an anagram for Aramaic, and I look at it and I'm like, that's really interesting. Not to mention that we'll pull it up here eventually, but it has the characters used, the actual font of it is the same as Phoenician and what they say is Paleo Hebrew. And so
That's interesting.
I always like, in the Torah community, being deep into that for many years, we were always talking about this with the paleo, and I'd always be like, who's the one that's the authority now telling us that this is the right one when all three of these look exactly the same? It's like, who's like, oh no, this is the correct one. And in my mind, I'm like, because some scholar that we're all questioning is telling us that that's for sure Ge'ez, and this is for sure the Phoenician, and this is for sure the and Phoenician just in its own name is like Phoenician, you know what I mean? It's kind of like,
Yeah,
yeah.
isn't it kind of wildly believed that the Phoenicians were the Philistines?
Yeah, I think that would probably be the popular belief if I had to guess.
Yeah, because even I want to say that there might be references to sea people in the
Yep.
Bible, and it's talking about the Egyptians had really problems with these sea people,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
so like the Philistines were fighting, which makes sense that at one point the Philistines dominated the land of Israel, right? And the
Yep.
Israels were under them. So
Mm-hmm.
it makes sense that at some point they would have had conflicts with Egypt, who's just to the south of them.
Yeah, for sure.
They
I
were
think
like
no doubt.
raiding Egypt and they couldn't stop them.
Yeah, they were a handful for a lot of people, it seems like. And I mean, with just obviously the David and Goliath, and then thinking about that story, and when you understand the five stones and the five brothers, of Goliath and his four brothers, ooh, nice. It's pretty interesting to think of those nations that were there and like how big it actually was, even if it wasn't like massive in size. I'm just talking about the vastness of kind of their coverage, so to speak, and then their authority seems to kind of like resurface throughout scripture and history.
I want to go back to one thing you said about the Ethiopian Bible or the Ethiopian kind of church. You also have the Bible just calls them Cush at one point. So
Mm-hmm.
Cush has pyramids, and Cush would have been, I guess, to the east of what we would consider Egypt. And so I thought it was really interesting. I can't remember. I saw a video a long time ago where it was this black guy was being questioned about by these liberals about how Christian was some kind of white religion, and he was saying, "Is it?" And he was talking.
Yeah.
He was going back into saying they had the early roots of Christianity. I mean, obviously, it's established that with like the Ethiopian eunuch who
Yep.
has the trip with Philip the apostle,
Hmm.
and he baptizes him. Yeah, so the early roots, the very earliest churches, yeah, some of them would have been in Ethiopia.
And they're said to be the ones who have the most long-standing, Bible that is their canon is it 84 books or 81 books?
88, I think. Yeah, theirs
Yeah.
is the oldest canon, which has the Book of Enoch in it.
Yep, still keeps it, and that's why the Ge'ez is said to be the only intact Enoch that it doesn't have like pieces of the like fragmented, so to speak. It's the only one that's supposedly intact.
Yeah, that's why it gets really troubling when people want to argue about what color somebody was. And to say
Seriously.
that Christianity wasn't about that, wasn't about, the followers of the way had nothing to do with what color you were, especially knowing that the original promise to Abraham that all families of the earth would be blessed, all the
Hmm.
nations would be welcomed in. Even I was reading today, and I was reading Isaiah, and I don't know if you kind of are coming about the Book of Enoch from the same kind of way, but what I really read now is believing we're in the little season. It doesn't really give me a lot more clarity about the time we live right now, but it gives me more clarity about the times of the apostles and the
Hmm.
times of the first century. Because I think a lot of the prophecies are specifically about that. And I was reading about how Lebanon was going to be fruitful. It was going to be a fruitful place. And of
Yep.
course, I don't know. It's just, I don't know. I feel like that a lot of people who criticize our beliefs now, they cherry pick things out of Isaiah. And if you read it, it's like it's filled with prophetic language that's not specific about like this was going to happen. So it's like the verse that people often question is like when Isaiah talks about how there's going to be this time where the wolf lays down with the lamb, and then kids are not going to have to worry about serpents and things like that. And when you're reading that, it's obviously talking about the first advent of Jesus when he comes, and
Hmm.
I don't believe it's talking about like real wolves and real lambs. I think it's talking about it's a spiritual concept. So Lebanon becoming this fruitful garden is not about Lebanon actually becoming a garden fruitful. It's talking about the people there are going to be welcomed into the kingdom. What do you
Even
think? I mean,
millennial.
that's I feel like that so much of it is like that people are still looking for this other time past this time that we live for this when everything's going to be
Hmm.
perfect, but it's all prophetic to when the Messiah comes. This happens then. And then when Christ is here, he's reinterpreting a lot of the kind of Old Testament scriptures to make them understand what it meant. In the same way, like we says that he's explaining to the apostles that leaven of the Pharisees is not actually leaven. He's not talking about physical bread. He's talking about the bread of life. He's talking about the living waters. He's talking about the idea that, yeah, the kingdom is not coming in observable ways. He's saying that John the Baptist was Elijah, but he really wasn't Elijah, but he was, and
Hmm.
that's why even people talk about, so when was the Mount of Olives split? Now, I wonder if it was a physical split, if it could have really been split physically. And now we have all this sediment and all this other stuff that's been dumped on, and you can't even tell that it was split, but it was split
Right.
then. Or
Hmm.
it mentions when Elijah is supposed to show up that he's going to fill in valleys and he's going to make mountains low and he's going to make crooked roads straight. Does anybody really think that that's what John the Baptist did? Or did he do that in a spiritual sense?
Yep.
Making the way straight for the Lord, for the Messiah. And he did that. So, in the same way, was the Mount of Olives literally split in two? Or was it a spiritual thing when Jesus gives the Olivet Discourse talking about the end times? I mean, isn't it kind of like, wouldn't that almost be poetic too? Is that he's speaking about the destruction of Jerusalem as he stands with his 2 feet on the Mount of Olives?
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it too. I don't know if I've ever like thought about it that way in that light. But I mean, it's like the only book that we would ever take in just like we kind of talked about this before, but that you would just restructure the chapters, you know what I mean? And just kind of like throw it around and just not take it in order where it's like, I mean, Jeremiah has certain chapters that you can tell it's literally talking about a time then and a time in the future,
Yeah. Hmm.
like at the same time. But it's pretty evident when that happens. I mean, once you become like a little bit more well versed with the scriptures and you've read it through and through a few times and stuff, you start to notice like, oh, I get it, because you start to understand the actual history in chronological order. Okay, they went to Babylon, they did this, they were taken into captivity here, then you have the Assyrians, you know, all those things start to line up, and it's no longer like this jumbled kind of mess in your mind. You actually can make sense of it and figure out. But it makes total sense that the prophecies lead from, you know, that's why Enoch is so important, I think, lead from a time of then, pre-flood world, into telling about the post-flood world starting to talk about Messiah's time more and more and more, and then Messiah coming here, confirming those things, speaking in detail about them, some of them obviously with tricky words and stuff that you have to take time to understand, eyes to see and ears to hear. And then he does give you the foreshadowing of like the future events and things like that. But also you get the apocalypse of Messiah, which is Revelation, and you get his apocalyptic book, which tells you about that coming. But that's also, we've learned, not all talking about future, like long future events. Most of
Right.
it is talking about right there. And I do think the lamb and the animals laying together and things like that. Let's be honest. Even if you're talking about millennial kingdom, did they go to just, they weren't not eating and living and doing things on earth and stuff. I mean, there was still death. You know what I mean? There's like, it has to be based on like, you know, the unrighteous and different things that they say in there. There had to be, aging and things, I guess is what I was trying to point out there. And I wonder, like, I don't feel like all the animals were laying down hanging out at that point.
No, I don't think, again, I don't think that's what it means, because you think about that when Jesus gives the apostles the authority to tread on serpents and scorpions. Does anyone really think he was talking about snakes and bugs? Or do you
No.
think he was talking about spiritual things when he says that? So what about
Hmm.
when Isaiah is prophesying about this time where the children are not going to have to worry about being bit by serpents?
Yep.
Do you think he was really talking about actual snakes, or do you think that could also be a spiritual concept where he's talking about maybe the devils, the demons? They're not
Same
going
as
to.
bruising the heel and you would smite his head, you know, like I mean that's from the very beginning of scriptures, you know, in Genesis it's talking about like the serpent and what it would do to your heel and then what you would do to its head. I mean, it's not, it's speaking metaphorically, of course, of like what would be in a spiritual sense. It's a physical sense too, you know what I mean? But not in the physical of literally, it's not a literal
Right.
physical with that. It's happening in the physical and the spiritual. We know that, but it's not the literal sense of like them laying together. I don't think it makes any sense because that time wouldn't have happened if it was prophetically speaking about eternity. Sure, then I could see how you could like have that, but I think it would have been dressed up situationally a lot better with the words used. The words used there, I think, is exactly what you're saying. It's a spiritual sense of what would be taking place. You know, being like doves and like serpents, wise like serpents and gentle like doves,
Hmm.
is he's not literally telling you to like turn into a white bird and fly around and stuff like that. It's obvious that we know what these things mean. So yeah, I think you're correct in that for sure. I think a lot of these things, if you don't look at them like that, then you start to look at stuff like that. And that's where like the reaching thing gets a little out of hand, where you can't confirm something in the timeline like what we're seeing right now. We always bring up that Euphrates drying up, and it's just like, where's the blood and the rivers and the waters and the everything dead and 2/3 of the world gone? And I mean, like, none of this has happened. I mean, I could see people thinking that a lot more closely if, say, all of a sudden, like the stuff that happened with those censuses that were saying. I just saw a video on that like yesterday about like the population dropping like crazy in all the different countries. You've seen that, right?
No, I
Deagle
haven't.
or whatever,
Mm.
the Deagle census that came out a while ago, and it would say like in 2025, like America was supposed to drop like 80% in the people of the UK. Paul just did a video on it.
No, I've not heard that. I got to look into that.
Yeah, he just did a video on it, and I hadn't heard about it in a while, but apparently they've renounced a lot of the stuff and different things they said, but they were trying to say like pandemic, different things like that. And there was the like UK literally is down to like 14 million people after it, and like the United States drops like hundreds of millions of people all of a sudden. But it's like all these third world countries and Eastern countries stay alive, and
Mm.
they actually go up. And so they questioned Deagle on it a lot, and we're like, what the heck is this? Like, you guys are saying that there's going to be mass fallout, and that like Canada, America, the UK, like all these places are just going to lose almost all their population. And they were like, what are you
When was this?
insinuating?
When was this done?
Oh, this is a while ago. This had to have been like 5, 7 years ago or something like that,
Oh
And
gosh.
it might not have been that long ago, but I want to say it was like 2019 range or something like
Oh
that right
gosh.
there,
It sounds like somebody knew something was coming.
Yeah, so it's like I don't know. Everybody's of course thinking about like, people who took something and like is there going to be a point where like a switch is flipped and then everybody's just boop, 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 you know?
I've heard all of those conspiracies, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I pray that's not the case. One thing you said, I saw somebody who was trying to rebuff the little season, and he was talking about how all the seas are going to be blood and all the rivers are going to be blood. And I was like, you read it, and it's like you're inserting that word all in there. When it
Hmm.
says the sea turns to blood, does that mean the ocean turns to blood? I mean, you can interpret it as that, but does it actually say that the ocean turns to blood? No,
Yep.
it does not. It says the sea. I really do think that people do get dogmatic about what they think it means, and then therefore they read it, even they insert words into the text to say what it means. It says the rivers are turned to blood. It says the
Yep.
seas turn to blood. Does that mean every body of water on the earth is turned to blood? I
Yep.
don't think it means that. I think it's important, even you go to Isaiah, to go back to what we're talking about, that most of these passages are about the first advent of Christ. So when people say that hasn't happened yet, I think you should revisit, did it happen in a way that you didn't see it? Because that's
Yeah.
the same way that people today say, who over there wear the little hats and says, Jesus cannot be the Messiah because he did not do these things that were supposed to happen. He did them, but not in the way they expected it. And
Yep.
that's why they continue to reject him still today. So be careful not to side with them and say, "Oh, when he comes back, it's going to be like that."
Yeah,
No, but what I was gonna say is that oh shoot, stupid dog lost my train of thought. Go ahead.
yeah, I was literally just reading Revelation recently and thinking, pondering on that exact what you were just saying about all, inserting the word all there. And I was just like, because I think it was like during the whole John Pounders video, and he was talking about certain things, and we were talking about like local versus worldwide. Like, what was it like? The all the things, like, is everything in the ocean dying? Is everything here dying? Is all of it turning to blood? Like all these things, and I was thinking in my mind just exactly what you said. Like, I don't really know if it says that we should be looking for like something like that. Even for the futurists. So yeah, I totally agree. I don't think it says that.
Oh, you know what? I remember what I was saying after the dog just distracted me was that you really understand, like when Paul's saying that we see in part and we prophesy in part. So the prophets do not know how it all works out. They're
Hmm.
only seeing, John is seeing a vision of a specific thing. So is he seeing the whole earth, the whole plane of earth, and he's seeing every bit of it? We only know he's saying, like, this is what I saw. I saw the sea turn to blood. I saw the rivers turn to blood. Does that mean 100% of the earth that happened? No, I think that that's exactly what Isaiah is doing. He's seeing in part, so he's prophesying in part. So you understand, like, that it's not told in a crystal clear fashion. So it does give people the ability to say, what do you think it means? And with humility, you could say, well, this is what I think it means. I also notice a lot especially in Isaiah and these other prophets, is when it talks about the mountains being removed. I mentioned earlier when we talked about, I was mentioning Enoch mentions Enoch sees these mountains, and there's like one that's made of gold, there's one that's made of silver, there's one that's made of this other kinds of metals.
Iron and liquid
Yeah, and
metal.
I was thinking like that sounds eerily similar to the Nebuchadnezzar statue that's There's gold head, it's got silver body, it's got bronze, and then it's got iron, then it's got iron and clay. I think that that's what it means because even you think about when I think the Lord is telling Isaiah to prophesy against these mountains, the mountain
Hmm.
of Seir, like the mountain
Yeah.
of this, the mount, so is he prophesying against mountains? He's prophesying against kingdoms. So when these mountains are removed, is it literal mountains that are removed, or is it these kingdoms that are removed?
I wonder if that's where the whole Titan crossover comes from, where everybody thinks they're all the mountains are giants laying down and stuff. If that's where the crossover confusion comes from, is the like labeling it like that because that scriptures those scriptures in Enoch like interpret things as mountains, so they're like, oh, this has got to be like speaking indirectly about like the Titans or this or that. I could see how people could confuse that or something, but yeah, I think you're right with that. When you look at it, it's got to be just like when you see like the Assyrian and stuff like that, or certain things that come up in scripture. It's obviously talking about either a principality or like a deity. Could be like Gog and Magog. We could see that, a place and a deity. You could see the mountains obviously because trees. The
Hmm.
humans are likened to trees, so you got all those things in there. I mean, those are just, I think, even when Enoch gets into, obviously, when you get into the animal part, the dream about all the different animals, it's
Yeah,
obviously
the
talking about
animals that are
Adam and
mating, it's the angels, you know.
yeah. Yeah, you got Adam and Eve and different things like that. I mean, obviously talks about that part of that, and then it goes into like different things, speaking about angels and different things like that. So, um, yeah, it's there's a lot of that stuff in there in scripture. And then, sometimes people will read it, even like Nile River. That's a big one for me because it's like that's a Hebrew word that means like brooks and streams. So that's the other thing that's in scripture a lot is like depending on the translation you might have a Hebrew word that's inserted into the text, which I think like people like Dr. Pigeon. That's why I pulled up the Ge'ez because I was reading Dr. Pigeon. He's big in Torah and stuff like that. He wrote the Sefer, but he does that all the time. Like where instead of writing salvation, he'll put Yeshua. He'll write things like that, and I know what to interpret it as because I was deep in that community for a while and I studied a lot of Hebrew and stuff like that. I'm not by no means like fluent or anything, but a lot of times you see it from translation to translation. It really is like I always say you got to get past the author by going to the Strongs. You got to get past the Strongs by going into the word usage because even the Strongs has a lot of confusion in it. And I think his ties to certain groups and stuff I think are questionable, but that's neither here nor there. When you look at the Strongs and you question a certain word usage or something like that, then you go into like all of that usage and see it's like, oh, it's 160 something times. But if it's like one time it's used as what and like 300 times it's used as who, then maybe you should probably go with the who,
Right. Yeah, yeah.
and stuff like that. But so there's a lot of that in scripture that I think gets really confusing. But I also think the one is if you have like a predetermined bias whenever you read scripture, it really is going to flood your thoughts with whatever you're trying to box things in at that point instead of just openly letting it like we've read with John 14:16, was it it's the Spirit has given him Messiah's name to teach all things, and if you don't let it do that you can very well shut it off, and just put your own bias in there where you end up just kind of going through the scriptures and you don't really want to look at anything in a new light, and Abba might be over there like giving you a little nudge like, come on man, I want you to see this, but you're so stuck on this doctrine or this bias. And I think we've all done that. We've all come out of it or we're still in it, whatever way it is, but got to be careful with that because that's the ones that like really seem to like prevent people from like bursting open with like new knowledge.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, before I just want to say this real quick and then we can maybe get into the Enoch study, is that I do really feel like that, and I might have been guilty of this before when I was believing in the premillennial view, is I think that the reason why we get strawmanned to say that, like so much about they want to conflate the little season people to full preterism because I think that they believe the millennial reign is like the time with the new heaven and new earth. You know what I mean? Like
100%.
if you really see their arguments, that's kind of what they believe. And I once believed that it was a physical kingdom, like Jesus is right there. These glorified saints are right there. It's great. So how is there any dissent during this time? Because you'd think like, well, this is the right way to do things. Like people would see that, and again, it would require zero faith if you could see the glorious city with the saints and the angels hanging out, and it'd be, how could the devil deceive people? So with that understanding that, what if it was not like that, and it was not perfect? Just like Jesus rules right now, it's not a perfect place. And I think that anybody who's a Christian would acknowledge that Christ is king and he's sitting on his throne. And so he is reigning. So why isn't it perfect? It was not perfect during the 1,000 years either. But there was someone in charge. And again, they're all supposed to be leading them. The church is supposed to be leading people. And you think about the kingdom that's the mustard seed, and expands out and it gets bigger. It covers the whole earth. I believe that is your millennial kingdom. That's what the millennial kingdom was like. And so, was it perfect? No. It's not a time where like it's literally like the whole earth is like the Garden of Eden, because I think that's what they're picturing. Oh, when did the lion or the people, depending on if they believe in the Mandela effect, the lion and the lamb or the wolf and the lamb?
The wolf and the lamb. So
when were they laying down? Like I think they're picturing Eden in their head. But that's not what the millennial reign is described as. Even if you think this is a literal thing or a spiritual thing, it mentions that there's these pilgrimages, what for like Sukkoth is they have to go, the nations have to come up to worship, otherwise they won't get rain.
Yeah.
Okay, so whether that's a literal thing or a actual physical thing that took place, why would they need to go make this pilgrimage? And if they didn't do it, bad things would happen to them, because they had the option to do either or. So I think, honestly, I believe those are spiritual concepts, because I don't believe that people went back under the law during the millennial reign. But I would say that there's many scriptures to point to the fact that it's not perfect. This is not a new heaven, new earth. We don't believe that. So
I don't know how they would how we could wrap our heads around that, because then did righteous people or anything at the end there? This all of a sudden they just, when the 1,000 years was up and Satan was loose back, they were just like infested with evil and just decided to turn.
Right, exactly. I mean, well, how would it? I mean, you really have to give me an answer. Like, how do you think like I said, I always said this, that if you don't believe we're in the little season, I think it's still important to talk about it, because somebody one day is going to live in it. So what do you think it's going to be like? How would the devil trick people? It makes sense to me that it wasn't always a perfect time, and there was always dissenters. And the dissenters now have grabbed a more prominent role, probably as the elites in this. Maybe that's kind of like the whole idea of these secret societies kind of living through the millennial reign. And guess why they had to be secret? Because if they were saying the things openly, they got burned at the stake and things like that. That's what happened to the Knights. That's even like historically what they say would happen to the Knights Templar. They were worshiping the Baphomet, and the church burned them at the stake when they figured it out.
Yep.
So that's why these secret societies have always remained secret, and that's why you get to the establishment of a place like the United States in 1776, and they have this religious freedom, which we're taught is the ability to practice whatever version of the Protestant church as you want to, because it's like they even viewed in the times of, we're told, Kennedy, it was like controversial that some American president was going to be a Catholic, which just seems so insane to me now. You know what I'm saying? Like that was the controversy. Oh, they're not going to elect a Catholic. That's crazy. So the idea of you could practice any brand of Christianity you wanted to, that is not what the religious freedom was about. And it sure as heck was not bringing Islam over here. It was their secret Luciferian cults that were now legal.
Had to be. You can see it, because it's like when you study the little season and you get into like that whole transitional period, whether you're talking about like orphan trains or like different things like that or whatever it was, you see this like scramble for the earth. It seems like one for like seeking and like this adventure, treasure seeking and stuff like that, but also this kind of like rapid race to domination, like people going around. Even when you look at stories like Tarzan and stuff, and you see the guy like in the modern Tarzan, he's like they tell more of the story about that guy that like was a almost like a conquistador type dude, and he's through there with all his money, and he's just trying to find all of this stuff as fast as he can, and then just have like the ability to take domination and stuff. So you look at it, it seems like there was the secret societies just literally staying secret. And then boom, as soon as they knew like it was on, they're all just like bam, 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 bam,
Yeah.
as fast as they could rush to it. I mean, you do see the difference of the word between the city in Revelation and then parabole, which it literally says in the Greek that it's like an armory or barracks. So I've always like pondered the thought of like kind of like a connection between the outside realm where Messiah is reigning and glorified saints like like who came to him. Obviously they died, and if they were beheaded and everything like that, and then went and like maybe they did like come back and they were going through and trying to do it. But in reality, like everything that's talked about, everything that we can see historically and stuff, it still seems like there was an urgency to keep the earth in homeostasis. You know what I mean? Like there was still work to be done. It is like you said, it wasn't just magically perfect where everything was there and stuff. Otherwise, why would societies like needed to be secret? Why was there groups that were obviously evil that were like hidden away and that they just came back into the forefront when Satan was released? We see the Statue of Liberty, which signifies that, from everything from the 11-pointed satanic star all the way up to the broken shackle at the foot and different things like that. And then it seems like there was just an instantaneous resurfacing, a battle between like Madeline talks a lot about like Theodosian law and different things like that. Whatever it was that was during that time, like there was still seemed to be a battle that was going on, even though it was like the millennial kingdom. There's nothing about it that says, and that's where I think you're right that either people, misconstruing the Armageddon time versus Gog and Magog time that we see in Revelation 20 versus like the time that you see in the earlier parts of Revelation, and kind of lumping that together or putting them out of chronological order. And then it leads you to believe in these kind of things where you start taking Zechariah and different passages from these and starting to plug them in and being like, no, look, that's it right there. But then it's like, there's sacrifice. That's why I've always thought, are these passages in Zechariah really talking about Second Temple time? Like where they had to be brought back in, otherwise the nations wouldn't have got the rain? Or is it talking about millennial kingdom time? Because like you even see in Enoch, this is the one that got my mom to, or not Enoch, Ezekiel. This is the one I got my mom to really realize it's not in chronological order, and the chapters need to be reordered. Where I'm like, you're telling me New Jerusalem's going to have sacrifice? And she's like, immediately she was like offended, like, deeply offended, like, no way, I would never insinuate that. And I'm like, well, then how can we say that?
Then this temple that it's talking about in Ezekiel is not talking about New Jerusalem.
It's not, it can't be, because why would we have, and there's like, Sean from Kingdom and Context, he reads those literally, and he gets on and debates people,
But that's such a weird thing to do, because I would say that with humility, when you read the end of Ezekiel and it's talking about this new temple, many people question me about it, and I've said honestly it's really hard to pin down, because it's like he's getting this vision of this temple and he's told to measure it, and he's getting these specific measurements. And we're told that the second temple did not look like that. Now, we do know that it's possible that when Herod the Great improved what they built in the times of Nehemiah and Ezra, it could have resembled that. Maybe not perfectly, but maybe maybe they were trying to build it to those standards. But the truth is, there's really no context of that vision and that prophecy about this temple.
Mm-mm.
So how could anyone be for certain say this is when this temple will be rebuilt? And it doesn't that kind of contradict the whole idea that Christ is the cornerstone of a new temple that Peter and them are talking about with living stones, and we are the temple, and God does not dwell in buildings made with human hands anymore, so he doesn't need a temple like that. And and also in Hebrews 8, when it talks about how this old covenant's passing away and the temple is going to be done away with, we have a better high priest now. The one doesn't need to sacrifice for himself. And Yeah, that context is just like, you know what I'm saying? Like, again, they always accuse us of cherry picking stuff. I would say that's cherry picking because then you have all this other stuff that would seem to be contradict what the new covenant and what it's supposed to be like afterwards. So yeah, I
Hmm.
would definitely agree that people, like I said, people need to be more humble, including maybe myself, that if you don't understand what it means, just say you don't understand. But yeah, like it's when you isolate chapters or certain verses, yeah, well then you can kind of say, oh, well, see, here's the gotcha moment because your little season does not account for that. It's like maybe it does, but maybe your interpretation is off.
Yeah, like Isaiah 66, I think fully tells the story of like what you're talking about right now. He's like he's telling him like, where is your temple? So I'm wondering like, is this talking about him seeing that time? Because it says, can a nation be born at once? You know, and as soon as she travailed, so it's like as soon as tribulation hit, she brought forth her children. And that, is that talking about her like the clutching, you know, the clutching away and everything? But it's like, is he talking about it after he says like, where is the temple that you built for me? So was this thing, is he literally foreshadowing like this is being destroyed, now it's destroyed, and now like the nation is being born at once, and it's not the nation that everybody thought it was in that physical form back then, because it failed. You know, Levitical, everything failed. All of it had to be brought back to Melchizedek, Messiah. And that's basically when you understand all of the prophets, that's what it's talking about with Messiah. It's kind of like Abba's so long suffering that he gave them the opportunity. They wanted all these things. They brought all their ways from the nation out. They kind of put, you know, kind of like lumped it together and tried to make a physical kingdom of the heavenly kingdom, to say that they could, even with the golden calf, they literally said tomorrow's a feast for Yah or the Lord. And then he's like, Moses, get out of my sight and let me kill them all and start over and make a great nation of you.
You
And
know
it's
what's
like,
happening down below? Yes.
yeah, seriously. Like if you look at that, it's like they tried to take everything from their ways, and that's where I think Satan did a good job infiltrating the nation of Israel or Yasharel from the nations after the Exodus. Is they were all in there, and you could see it from Korah to all these different things. They were just constantly pushing the limits with, you know, and that's why Abba just more and more, especially in Ezekiel 20. Why would Ezekiel 20 tell you, I gave you commandments that were not good, judgments you would not follow, and I turned them over to their own ways? He does that with all of us. That's why, like Proverbs 6:23, you know, it talks about like your commandment is the lamp, and your instructions are the light, and reproofs of instruction are the way of life. Like it's literally telling you that you look forward to going through your reproach. That's Abba, one, showing you that he flogs the children that he loves, and he's waking you up and bringing you out of that. But two, he's teaching you like how those instructions work. Like this is the way that you do it. And so you could see it through all of it. I think that's why the whole thing with Jethro, you know, Jethro is a Midian priest. It says it plainly. Job was an Edomite.
Jethro being Moses' father-in-law.
Yeah, Moses' father-in-law, and he's like, "Hey, you can't handle this." And nowhere in the text do we find that like Moses is like, "Hey, father, should I give all these things that you gave to me to the children to do it for me?" Like we don't see that in the text. So was that even the conversation?
It was it descriptive and not prescriptive.
Yeah, because everybody's like, the Torah was given on Sinai, that's why we still follow it and everything. And I'm like, no, it wasn't. The 70 elders went up there, stood before what it says is Elohim or God, you know, like could have been Messiah there before. And then the Most High is who Moses is in front of, you know, was like meeting with and everything. So it's like, you look at, was it given? Because the 70 elders were like, nah, we're good. You do this and you go talk to him and we're going to go back down. And it says that the only thing that they heard on Sinai was the Ten Commandments with his voice. And he says, my sheep hear my voice. And then you get into Deuteronomy.
And also it said that the commandments were the ones that were written by the finger of God.
Right. Correct.
So he didn't write all the other, was it 300 and whatever?
Yeah, sometimes say like, you know, the 600 plus.
Oh, 600, yeah, 600 extra laws. He didn't write all those.
Yeah.
With his hand.
And you look at that too, like it's literally in Deuteronomy 4 and 5, Moses repeats the Ten Commandments twice. And then he says, and Yah or the Lord said no more. So it's like, why would he say these things? He goes back through it and tells them the story of this. He doesn't talk about any of the Torah that everybody's bringing up in Leviticus, and this is what brought me out of it. Like following that, I still honor certain things, like coming out of the ways of the world, and like honoring the Passover and like things like that, and observing them, and just acknowledging that's when our Messiah died, acknowledging like what Shavuot or Pentecost was about, acknowledging the Feast of Tabernacles or Sukkot for like Messiah's came to tabernacle with us and was circumcised on the eighth great day, but beyond that, you have to understand the timeline. Or otherwise we just literally try and say that we're still supposed to do it all, like like the group over there in Israel right now is trying to get everybody to believe, and then they're imposing the other things with the other laws, the Noahide stuff, and everything that they're bringing up. And I can't even find where those are pulled from in Jubilees.
Yeah, we need to maybe do a podcast talking about the Noahide laws.
Yeah, because it's like so many people are like looking. There's a lot of people who are going Kabbalistic. You know what I mean? Like Kabbalah, big time, where they're going into it and they're reading certain books or whatever, and they're like, "Look at this! It's the Tetragrammaton." So it's like it's Yah's name, it's the Lord's name, and it's like this. It's on here. We're supposed to do this, and they're like Shekinah and like getting into it. It's the Holy Spirit, and I'm like, whoa. Like there's a lot more meat to this, this plate in front of you, and it's not necessarily the spiritual food that you might want to be chewing on, because they get into it and they're like, the Sephiroth tree, look, there's Messiah in the middle. And so many of the things that they do, I mean, Sephiroth, like anybody looks at like Final Fantasy VII, all these different games that have like these things in it, it's like it's been plugged into people. And now like with the whole New Age kind of thing breaching into the stuff, we'll have to get into that. I think we should get into the Enoch for it's going to be like 3 hours before we even did it.
Yeah, the one thing I wanted to say real quick, though, and I want to ask you a question before we get into Enoch.
Yeah.
Do you think it's possible that the prophecy about that third temple, or that other, not a third temple, but that temple in Ezekiel, do you think that's possible that could have been a conditional prophecy? That it wasn't, because it didn't really say, I'm going to give you this place. It's literally him just describing this other temple. Is it possible that if things would have worked out differently, if the Israelites would have been, or the people from Judea, if they would have actually repented and did things right, if that would have been something that they would have gotten, but they did not get? Because it's funny that people, they always say, oh, well, God promised them this forever, but he also says, if you keep my commandments, then you'll get to keep this land. But then we know the rest of the story is that they did not. And then they got expelled from the land 2 times. And then so, again, through Christ, that promise is good. But outside of it, no, those people had transgressed those commandments, and therefore they were not allowed to stay. It was a conditional promise. You do this, you'll get to stay here. If you do not, you're going to get kicked out of here.
I think that's no different with the Exodus group, because it's literally like they were that generation was banished, and they had to die first before, and then there was only 2 of them, left to go, which is really interesting. That one of them is from Ephraim, Joshua, and then you have Caleb, who's a Canaanite, so it's like, and you look at the way that it goes in there, the people that got to enter the land, they were the only ones that were left to go. Wait, is that the same Caleb that became king of Judah?
No, he never became.
No. Oh, no.
He never became king. But yeah, that's a great. I mean, I think that's probably one of the best examples that you can always use in the Bible. Is like, especially when people say that all of Israel will be saved. You're like, but he promised them he was going to give them this promised land, but then he made sure that they all died out except for just 2 of them before they got in. So if he let all those other people die because of their lack of faith in the wilderness, then why do people think it's different later when people are faithless?
Even Moses. I mean, that's a massive one right there. He literally kind of, I don't know if you want to say embarrassed Abba, but he basically kind of made it seem that way, where he, acted in anger there instead of, doing the proper thing to the rock. He struck it, and in turn, he's like, "No, you're not." And
even what Moses, even Aaron and Moses,
and what was her name, Miriam?
Yeah,
like they all did the same thing. Where they even had it where the whole camp was waiting for her to come out of her uncleanness, basically, right? If I'm not mistaken. So, but yeah, you see that whole generation. I don't think it's any different. Like he sets it down the way that he does. But like I said in Ezekiel 20, why is he telling people that he gave you commandments that were not good and judgments you would not follow, and he turned you over to your own ways? He does it to all of us, because a lot of times I always say be careful what you pray for, because he might give you what you want to show you that you're not ready for it, and give you like a trial through that to where you're like,
Very true.
man, like I totally was not. I'm sorry, Father, that I was asking for all those things and rushing you on your perfect will for me, and I learned my lesson big time. But it could, I think everything was conditional for sure. I don't think you're wrong in that in any way, because everything was conditional. He's so long suffering that he allowed them to do these things that they felt they were going to prove to him in some way that, like, no, we'll do it.
Well, if you really think about it, it's always been conditional. And so if you do this, you'll get this. Well, unfortunately for us, nobody could do what he asked them to do. But then he sent his son who could, and for the benefit of us, all we have to do is believe on him, and then we get to you get the benefit. But if no one could do it, what could not be done, well then no, then the promises would not be good, because they were all conditional, but they were based on that he was going to send his son one day who could do what flawed men like us could not do. And so I think that's the important part of the story.
Yeah, Exodus 12:47 is what you just said right there, where it says there's one set of commandments for the homeborn and the stranger, and if the stranger comes and does these things, then he is now considered as the native born. I mean, what that tells you right there, it's a bloodline of obedience, and that he is looking for something in people that creates that righteousness, and then that's it. Seek him, do and follow in his ways. That proves that you're seeking him. Kind of like James says, right? You show me your faith, and I'll show you my faith by, is that what he says? Faith. Well,
he says, you show me your faith without your works, and I'll show. Yeah. And he's like, yeah. Well, he says, show me your faith apart from your works, and I'll show you my faith by my works.
By my works. Yeah. Correct. Yeah. So that's the thing. Like we can't just be like, the worst thing you could ever be is somebody who is claiming to be a follower of Father and Messiah, and then your representation of that is disgusting. You know what I mean? It's like, and I walked in that for many years of my life.
Yeah,
so.
James is really great for all that stuff. He's saying, like, and what John says, you got to be more than just hearers of the word. You got to be doers of the word.
Doers of the word.
He says, what James says, it'd be like, if you hear the words of God and then you don't go do them, it'd be like you looking in the mirror and then forgetting what you look like before you walked away.
Right.
I mean, it's so obvious. That's why I said it's funny. We just had a conversation because I just did a live stream with Brian, and we're talking about the pendulum swings so far because you have these hyper grace people. You might call them Nicolaitans that say you could do whatever you want. It's fine. Grace abounds. We're all good. Even though Paul says, because should we sin more so grace can abound? By no means. How can you live in what you once died to? If you died to that sin, how can you now live in it? You can't. Mm-hmm. So then you have people that swing to the Hebrew roots, or they swing to like orthodoxy or Catholicism or something that seems more strict and regimented than all the Protestant churches preaching hyper grace and the prosperity gospel and all that kind of garbage. Right. And people say, this doesn't seem correct, so I'm going to go so far the other way, where I might also be incorrect on this kind of more religiosity, kind of almost like Pharisee type spirit. Not saying that all those churches are like that, but I'm just saying that I think that's how the disconnect happens between what God wants you to learn through faith, which does not mean no works, means you do the works by your faith, because you can't please God apart from faith in Him.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
We should probably get to the Enoch study, or we're not going to do it.
Let's go.
But like I said, I teased that this will be a multi-part thing, so we weren't worried that we weren't going to get to it because we were not going to finish it in one day anyway. So, but before we get into the Book of Enoch, Josh with some words about Modern Roots Life.
Hey guys, thanks. Modern Roots Life is a faith-based company. We're all about the Father and Messiah. We try and do everything that we can based on the way that He would have done it at creation, the way that He intended this world to be. So we try and avoid a lot of things that you find in Western ideology. Even the holistic world is getting into just lab-made synthetics. So we do everything with no fillers, no synthetics, true, basically food powders and, salts and electrolytes like magnesium. Today, I just wanted to talk briefly about my Max Performance supplement, but a lot of men are out there struggling with everything from recovery to, body composition to libido, just everything to sleep, and they don't want to look into the synthetic hormone therapy route. This would be a good alternative for you. It's all natural, has Tungat Ali, has Fodasia root, and then it also has 100% grass-fed beef testicles, which is called orchic powder. It's amazing for boosting everything from your recovery to your sleep. Libido is a big issue these days with heavy metals and EMF frequencies, things like that. So it helps with that. So if these are anything that you're dealing with issues-wise, please contact me. I can coach you along with this, but I would definitely give this one. We have the regular male enhancement and then the Max Performance. The male enhancement, regular male enhancement, just has all beef testicles, which is really good at hormone curves for men, but also even when women can take a lighter dose of that and notice that their recovery, endurance, libido, sleep, and things will improve as well. So please check it out, guys. Thanks so much. So this would be, you can see here the text and everything. This is the Ge'ez, and then it has the interpretation of that text there. You'll see some stuff in here from this guy, like he even talks about Trump and different things like that. So don't want anybody to believe or think that, JT or myself.
Yeah, we're not. This is not necessarily an endorsement of this translation or this commentary on this translation.
Yeah, I just think it's like it reads easier than anything. And honestly, I don't think anybody's, for the most part, has like seen this. I know a lot of people have, but for the most part, anybody I've ever exposed this to, they're blown away like I was when I first found it. They're like, "What is this?" So it should be, based on what everybody says, is the only intact version of Enoch that isn't fragmented like a lot of the other ones. And it's just complete, and it's the one that's still kept in the Ethiopic canon till today. So let's get started. On account of the renown of the Most High to show mercy and compassion at the time of calamity with abundant compassion, speaking the truth in this adorned book, I, Enoch, a prophet, was blessed to deliver this book as an available helper in addition to what he desired for mankind forever. Amen. These are the sacred words which Enoch wrote to bless the chosen and justified who will be there in the day when that of the Holy Spirit is removing everything that they who became godless perverted. The Most High began speaking to his angels and said, Enoch is a man who can speak the truth, who will be in the presence of the Lord, even as his eyes can see. Enoch will be made to observe things from the angels by revealing things sacred in the heavens belonging to me. To know. Sorry. Sometimes it's confusing the way it reads. Mm-hmm. I testified in their presence altogether things to be made known for a distant time. I, therefore, am prophesying by no means for this generation, but rather for that which will come to pass at a remote chosen time. And he does have some footnotes, so if anybody's here, maybe we could include a link to this or something.
Yeah, sure.
So that way you guys can read along when you're seeing this. For the sake of the savor of the chosen, I, the Most High, am the speaker here in this book to them that walked misdirected, so they may have strength as a gift to have authority over this world. Also, I am speaking to the holy ones that had departed heaven. In that place I will tread upon Mount Sinai, so that they will not dry out spiritually in the camp, and they will not be spread out to dry by means of a steadfast firmness from heaven, of my steadfast firmness from heaven. The fallen watchers will be afraid to be imprisoned, which causes them to quake. These are they who took for themselves wives, making all tremble internally because of their terror, which prevailed into all the parts of the earth. Then the lofty mountains, these fallen watchers, will quake and fall below, to make a hill from what was tall, and they will just melt like honey in the comb in the presence of flame. Then the Most High will submerge the earth, and everything which is above the surface will perish. This flood will take place upon everything as a judgment from on high. They that are approved will be elevated above the flood water, along with all that is in them.
Hey, look,
with them.
Let's go back real quick. I want to mention something. So verse 6, it says, Then the lofty mountains, these fallen watchers, will quake and fall below to make a hill from what was tall, and then will melt just like honey in comb in the presence of a flame. So that's really interesting. So it's kind of making it almost sound like is it saying these lofty mountains are these fallen watchers?
I think it's more likely that it's describing them as big
Yeah,
and mass.
it's describing them as mountains, but it is also kind of interesting that it says they will quake and fall below to make a hill from what was tall. I'm just like I said,
That's it.
I'm just thinking out loud here. Isn't it interesting? In the land, what we are told is Israel. There's really only one mountain in that place.
Mm-hmm.
But the Bible talks about the Mount of Olives, Mount
Yep.
Zion. What was the other one? There's another a couple mountains in there that are mentioned in that area. Even think about Jesus telling the apostles, when you see the abomination of desolation, flee to the mountains of Judea. Guys, there's no mountains in Judea. There's lots
Nope.
of hills.
Mm-hmm.
Is that
Unle-
why there's no mountains in the southern part of Israel? There's lots
That's
of hills,
interesting.
though.
Yep, definitely,
What do you think?
definitely
I mean, is
hills.
that, do you think there's anything to that? Is that people ask when, yeah, the Mount of Olives split, but like there is no mountain of olives.
Mm-hmm.
It's a hill.
It's a hill, yeah, for sure.
It's a hill that, of course, if those things were laid low, and also we believe that during Armageddon is likely when you had kind of what you would call the mud flood, right? Maybe they were made low and then sediment covered them, so now they're even less impressive than they were. Just
Yeah,
saying.
that's could be. That's an interesting take.
Okay, you can continue.
Continue. I read seven, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to eight. I minimize it so I can actually see like the podcast too. However, when he gives them greeting at the resurrection, he will clothe them, and he will preserve the chosen to be on earth, not the fallen watchers in their kind. Mercy from above will happen for mankind. Compassion will ultimately happen for them, coming from he who has authority to issue compassion, and they that were shown mercy, lighted up by shining, and became at peace. The life they received from the Master was like his everlasting life when they became bright.
Well, see, so the context is that too, is that, so again, Enoch is writing to a distant generation. He's definitely not writing at the time this is written to the current people. It's kind of
Hmm.
like the book of Daniel that was not meant, the prophecy was to be sealed up for the times of the end. So if you're thinking what he's talking about is the coming judgment of the watchers in the flood of Noah's day, he's not, because he's talking about right after that, he's talking about the resurrection.
Yep.
So that would, again, that would have been in the times that I believe that, yeah, Israel as they knew it was ever changed. The
For
landscape did no longer look like what the Bible describes it to look like.
Yeah, I think that's one major reason why this book is so important. You know, first Enoch specifically because it talks about certain things, and then when you complement that with books like Daniel, and then read into like Matthew and different things like that, you start to see things in a different context and light than you would if you didn't like reference these at all. And it's so plainly written by Enoch that he's not speaking to that generation, but a distant one that is to come, like at the time. And he's talking about like a time of trial or a time of tribulation that is, you know, like coming upon the earth. So, you know, it's up to the interpreter what they see that as. But I think it's pretty obvious when you start to understand the chronological order of things, which things lead up to Messiah, like we were saying, and the Messiah is telling you things that are going to be in the future, but he's also telling you about the times that are right now that are being fulfilled. He's also telling you and distinguishing like what's not happening yet and what is happening, you know? So,
You know, this is completely aside, but I just was thinking about that because you were saying about, so like in the book of Revelation, Christ is telling John, he's saying, I'm going to show you the things that are and the things that must soon come to pass. I never really thought about this before, but remember in the Olivet Discourse when Jesus is saying that he's describing all these the birth pains,
mhm.
and he's saying, but the end is not yet. And then he gets down to, and the gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed to all nations, and then the end will come. Right?
Mhm.
Do you know what's not in the book of Revelation? They really
That.
don't talk about. Well, you know, actually, it does say an angel proclaims the gospel, but at that point, it's like isn't it interesting that it doesn't talk about, like, it's not talking about a future prophecy of the gospel making it to all the nations. It's like, I wonder if it's because it already had happened at the
Yeah,
time,
that's
at the time that the book of Revelation is taking place.
yeah, it could be because I mean, and he says like he almost basically says like I John who is in the midst of tribulation with you almost
Right.
it seems like when he says that. So, could he like be seeing these things that are there and then, knowing that he's going to be there too, but everything was said like especially like it starts and ends with I'm coming quickly.
Yeah.
So
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
Messiah says that twice, so we know that it's right then. I mean, that's like in our community, obviously, that's not a question anymore, but it really does seem like that's a good look at it because it could have already taken place with that. I'm trying to think of a way that I honestly, I'm trying to reverse that and say, like, is there a way that it's not? But like, I don't really
Well,
see how
the,
you,
the one thing that Jesus does not tell the churches, go proclaim the gospel of the kingdom, because that already happened.
yeah, I think you might be right on that.
He
That's
doesn't
in,
say go do this first. It's like
mm-hmm.
this is already going to happen. This stuff's happening. The things that he was describing were to come past very shortly.
Yeah.
So it seemed like whatever the obstacles were prophetically had already been removed. So it could happen like a thief in the night. Okay,
Especially if it was,
go ahead and get
yeah,
back to this because I want to read.
yeah.
This is a really good verse right here.
Yeah, if anybody, everybody will talk about it right after. But of course, anybody who's read the canon knows what this is.
Mm.
I beheld as it came to be that 10,000s of his holy angels took action to execute justice upon they who came from above. These angels diminished those angels who had become godless and accused all who have the flesh of the mankind. They wrapped them up. Or they wrapped them to imprison them who, impiously sinning, made an effort to supplant the Most High.
Yeah, so I want to go into this, and so this is those of us who believe that Enoch should be included in the canon. This is our best defense, probably out of all of the reasons to defend this book, is if you go over to the Epistle of Jude, and Jude speaks in this is Jude. It's only one chapter in Jude, so it's chapter 1 of verse Jude, and it says verse 14. It says, "In Enoch also the seventh from Adam prophesied of these, saying, Behold, the Lord cometh with tens of thousands of his saints to execute judgment upon all, and to convince all the ungodly among them all their ungodly deeds which they have ungodly committed, and of all their hard speeches against the ungodly sinners have spoken against him." So Jude talks about the prophet Enoch, who's the seventh from Adam, so it's the one from the book of Genesis, and he literally quotes this verse. And I said,
Pretty much
we were talking
verbatim.
about this a couple, probably 6 or 7 episodes ago now, but I thought it was really interesting that the context that Jude is using, why he's quoting from Enoch. He mentions the angels in chains earlier that committed sexual sins, just like Sodom and Gomorrah. But that's where people, like when Brian and I first make the movie Ancient Angels, we're more concerned about like the Watcher stuff, right? We're not really thinking about it. But the context is the reason why Jude is bringing up Enoch is not about giants.
Mm-mm.
That's not what he's talking about. He's talking about this. So he believes he's living in the time where this is about to happen. And that is why he's quoting from the prophet Enoch. I think that's really interesting because, yeah, the whole context of this first chapter of Enoch is not about giants. It's not so much about the Watchers, even though they're mentioned. It's more about the apocalypse, the catastrophe that's coming, and the judgment that's coming upon the earth when the Lord comes with his tens of thousands of holy angels.
Yeah. In Second Peter, and you get it compounds it all through Scripture when you get it. There's like little tidbits that are in there, and I wonder if we get up to, like story time with Abba, and he's like, "Oh yeah, here's actually all the texts that were written about this that they took away from you guys or whatever." Like maybe he left it in his perfect way that was necessary for our time, but You know, you wonder if there's other pieces that were out of there, but he left us enough to find the meat and take us back to like books like this, because this is like when I was walking in Mr. Party Boy in Vegas and things like that. This is the book that brought me back. You know, this is the thing. Like because I was big into playing World of Warcraft. I might as well have been sponsored by Blizzard, and I like read this book when he brought me
You're like, oh
back
my
one day.
gosh, this stuff is in the Bible, kind of.
You know, it was like giants, and I was like, "This is like World of Warcraft." I remember telling my wife, and I was mind blown. And after that, I was just hooked. I was looking at all these things, and the more I'd get into it, I realized, you know, why. And then finding like the Little Seasons subject, I realized why so many of these books were removed. You know, because I used to be like, "Oh, it's talking about this and that," and now I'm like, "Man, there's so much meat for like actually interpreting scripture and prophecy for our time." That is, you know, obviously not there when these books are removed. So,
Yeah, it's totally like that. I thought that they were being removed because, oh, they don't want us to know about giants. But then they're like,
yeah,
that's not why they want. That's why the early people who are really trying to subvert the truth, they removed Enoch because it pointed to the Messiah that they had crucified,
yep,
not because of they worried people talked about the Watchers and the giants. Because the funny part about that is, if you read the Antiquity of the Jews by Josephus, who was trained kind of formally to be a Pharisee, he talks about Genesis 6 and he talks about it in the context of Enoch and giants and all the same things. So the Pharisees had no problem interpreting the Genesis 6 with the idea that the book of Enoch was correct about there were these watchers who sinned with women. They created this race of giants. And that's just part of the story, right?
yeah,
Because yeah, Josephus talks about that stuff. It's this stuff. It's the apocalypse stuff. It's the stuff
hmm
about the Gentiles coming, being welcomed into the heavenly family, is the stuff that they didn't like about the Book of Enoch. So you want? How
yeah,
about this? You want to do one more chapter? We'll do chapter 2, and then maybe we can do this. We can in the future we can talk about whatever we want, or maybe we can just do a full podcast where we go line by line, or maybe we can just take it in bite-sized pieces, like per podcast, a couple chapters, or however we want to do
yeah,
it.
yeah, for sure. We can do that, and I guess maybe we can just let today lead on like what we feel is best.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's get to. So this is the constellations are observed to cycle each year. Looking toward heaven, I pondered all the work therein, considering the way things change not, nor abandon themselves from lighting up inside heaven, performing in the way they were instructed to rise and set in order, restrained to return only in their season and not depart from their ordinance. Obviously, we're getting into like talking about the luminaries
A
here.
little biblical cosmology.
Yeah. I look from the earth's perspective at that which I learned concerning the workings thereof, which happen in heaven above her, the earth. I saw for myself what happens in the beginning of the year until the end of the year in the way it concludes, restrained by its duty, established and observed by the Most High. Take notice of summer and winter in the way how the soil holds the water that fills it up. If there are dark clouds, then the ground will be wet with precipitation from above, which comes to rest upon the earth.
I guess we should
Chapter,
probably go in chapter 3. That was pretty short.
yeah, chapter 3. Describing the difference between deciduous and evergreen trees. I looked and saw how all trees go dormant in the way they were seen, just as if they were dry, with the exception being from those 14 trees that restrained from making themselves throw down their leaves, being an evergreen. These did not dispel that which was expected from age until it will come time for them to renew their leaves again every 3 years. Which is really one of the things that made me believe in this book was that's this number of 14 trees is
Hmm.
actually confirmed in real life. That was one chapter, one passage. What are you doing?
Okay, we can continue.
All right. I observed from the days of summer how the sun rises, then afterward it receives precedence. Then you all sought out a shady place, screening your view of the sun, because the sun is burning you. Needless to say, use your outspread hand to measure and determine the warmth of the heat. When you learn of extreme heat, you all should not plant nor walk upon her, the earth, and do not walk upon her rocks, because the heat will burn you.
How did they determine which? why these all needed to be separate chapters.
I have no idea. Sometimes I get that,
Doesn't it all
like,
seem like it goes together?
yeah, I have no idea why they would do that. Because the canon, like, it seems like they break it out basically, like, categorically. Like, you can see it's like, oh, this is being talked about, so we'll lump this together, and then this is being talked about.
Let me grab my little
Uh,
Enoch book over here. I want to just a second.
Go for it.
Yeah, here's my R.H. Charles version. I wanted to
Hmm.
skip over see where this is. Go ahead, you can continue to read, but I'm going to see where it.
All right. I observed, because the next chapter is the juicy one. I observed how the trees in their greenness that clothed them bore their fruit after being prudent, concerning the reason why they held back their greenness. The greenness reappeared in a way how it accomplished this restoration during the life cycle of the trees. The activity of the trees from all that took place during the year by restraining what they were doing to produce leaves were acting in a way that they were expected to behave. They turned not away from these actions in the way how instructions was established for all those trees that produce fruit. They had received these instructions from the Most High. Then I saw the way the seas are arranged all together at the same time when they perform their ordinances. You fallen watchers, however, had not restrained yourselves, nor have you kept the ordinances prescribed by the Lord, but instead you deviated from those ordinances and spoke ill of all his great things. You were quick to perform deeds of impurity upon those which are his. You who were once above dwelling in his greatness, you of withered heart, had not become established in harmony with his heart. Now you fallen watchers, therefore, who were in that day lost to each other by curses through the years of your lifetime, you were bereft of your kind who are a perpetual curse, and it will not happen that they will receive mercy. Because of this that happened on that day of judgment, mankind will be given peace away from you. Because of this everlasting curse upon you fallen watchers, all the justified to be on earth are to be made brilliant, you who had become a curse for they that persistently sinned. This peace is assigned to you who were together at the same time in the company of these sinners. To mankind who are in the grave, light and peace will come to pass for them, and they will be inheritors of the earth. To you, however, those of you who became godless, you have become a point of much loathing. Then at that time of resurrection, these very chosen were granted wisdom and did not repeat their transgressions, not repeating their transgressions because of neglect to do so, and not because of compulsory service, but rather because they rendered praise to the Most High. They will give humble thanks because of wisdom and did not go wrong anymore. They were not condemned, not at all, in that day of resurrection. They did not die from beating, nor from the wrath like they suffered by the hand of the fallen watchers. Instead, they were accounted for those who are established to fulfill a long life in their salvation from death. They will have years of peace. The comforted were numerous, having joy because of those who were imprisoned, set to remain there in that place.
Should we
Now,
continue? Do you want to?
do you want to call it after this one, which is or do you want to leave
Oh,
this for
well, let's
the?
just talk about that real quick. I think that's really interesting. I've often wondered this too. Is that so? In the Book of Revelation, it mentions that when the dragon falls, he takes a third of the stars with him. So
Mm-hmm.
that's where you get the idea of a third of the angels rebelled against God as well. Well, I think it's really interesting. It almost kind of lays it out in plain words in that chapter 5 that the resurrected people are going to take their places. I've
Mm-hmm.
always thought that because you even think about, some people say that, well, that some people believe when you go to heaven you're an angel, and everyone says, "Oh no, we don't become angels," but we kind of do, almost like the way it's described. It's almost like that God is going to replace the rebellious angels with His elect, with His remnant. Because even if you think about it in Daniel chapter 12, it says that the wise are going to shine like stars.
Mm-hmm.
So is it possible that, again, you have these sons of God who rebelled? They sought the things of the flesh and not the things of the spirit, and then they get cast down. They're fallen angels, they're fallen stars. And then us who are on earth, who are of the flesh, seek the spirit, and then we replace those sons of God as we become sons of God. I think that's interesting that people don't understand that in the Old Testament, these watchers are called sons of God. That's what it talks about in Genesis 6, sons of God. So Adam was a son of God because he was a direct creation of God. But then the rest of us are sons of Adam, are sons of men. And then in the resurrection, in the New Testament, it's saying we have, I think it's John says, we have the right to be called sons of God if we're in Christ. So we are, Jesus mentioned, the people in the resurrection are like the angels that do not marry or given into marriage.
Mm-hmm.
So it does. I mean, that's what I think. What do you think?
Yeah, I was just trying to find that passage because I remember always growing up in the church and hearing that we would be placed higher than the angels, and I couldn't remember like where that's pulled
Well, it
from.
says it says that Christ in Hebrews that he when he became a man, he became a little lower than the angels, and then Paul says in Corinthians when he's talking about people needed not take their issues to court, right? Like he doesn't want people suing each other in court and taking matters to the
Mm-hmm.
court. And he's like, "Don't you know that you will judge angels?"
Mm-hmm.
So, in that kind of way, that I don't know that we are like I don't know that we're going to have authority over like the archangel Michael or something like that. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's more like that when there is dominion by Christ in his saints, the saints were going to be the ones who's sitting on chairs, right? They're going to be sitting on thrones of judgment.
Yep.
So maybe it's an issue where we're not judging God's holy angels, but maybe they are part of the judgment process of these watchers.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, you could see it because it seems like that the Watchers, like in Babel and different things like that. Of course, you could read like Jubilees or Jasher and stuff like that, other accounts. But even in the canon, just looking at it, it seems like they were placed there to like teach and kind of like be facilitators for humanity as like it was coming up, and then they like basically just chose to, you know, reveal things in a very negative way. Obviously, what we're about to read here in chapter 6 and on.
Did you ever see the movie The Eternals?
Yeah.
You know, that's like, so in The Eternals, I think it's a very obvious story where it's a Marvel comic, eventually becomes a movie, kind of sucked, but it was interesting in parts. But that's where they were there and they had a job to do. And it was weird in that movie that they were supposed to kill all these weird evil monsters,
Yep.
which was really odd. It's almost like they're
Mm-hmm.
fighting dragons and whatever. And so they were supposed to be there to protect humanity, but it also showed that there was this one eternal that gave men these ideas how to create inventions and gave them the idea for technology. So it seems really obvious that like yeah, they were supposed to do something and they were supposed to help humanity along, but they were not supposed to interfere. And then so
Mm-hmm.
later in the story, it's like they don't believe that their creator, the Earth Eternals, was doing a good job with how he wanted them to, you know, basically do their job with humanity. And so that one guy, Druid, he took control of their minds and
Yep.
he's like literally doing it when they're like it's in these Aztec times with pyramids. So yeah, it kind of makes sense that yeah, like that is your story of the Watchers. Watchers gave men technology. The Watchers were supposed to obviously they had some kind of job to do, but they were not supposed to interfere. Even I was funny. I just did a live stream and I was talking about Silver Surfer. So in the original Silver Surfer comic book or Fantastic Four, Galactus is coming. Which again, this is a
Mm-hmm.
Gnostic story. Galactus is like God coming in judgment on the Earth, and there's this character, this cosmic character called the Watcher, and the Watcher is really just supposed to chronicle things, but he's not supposed to interfere. Well, in this case, he does interfere. He gets into the story. His name's the Watcher.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting.
It's like this,
I've
like,
always wondered about the Eternals too, because there was 10 of them, if I'm not mistaken, and they, you know, when you read through Enoch and stuff, you got like you have like chapter 69 where it talks about the four that basically but right before that, you have, which is really interesting to me because a lot of people take that number 69 into like a lot of other types of things. But the symbol of Cancer in the
Oh
zodiac
yeah,
looks
yeah.
like the 69, and then you see the that chapter of Enoch literally talks about the ones who got the Watchers to leave their post, and it lists them off and stuff like that. And I always wondered, like, could the Eternals have been the ones? Because you always see, like, it seems like the other people that they're depicting, all the hybrids and the ones with psychic powers and all these different things. What do they call them? Why can't I think of it? The what do they call the X-Men? Mutants.
Oh yeah, the mutants.
Yeah, yeah, the mutants. It almost seems like the offspring of them and stuff, and then it kind of goes back in the order because they even it's kind of like they reveal their name that I've always thought is what like they're saying when they say Hashem, like, but they say that oh that's the name. But if you look at the very beginning of that movie, it talks about Ashima,
Well, his
and they
their creator is called Asherim. Asherim. So it's like his name means like the line or the name.
yeah, it's like it almost looks like I think it's a Shema that was written on the beginning. Is it Asherim? I thought it
His
was
name is like Ereshim or Asherim,
yeah, okay.
but
They
it is clearly it's got that Hashem, which would be the name.
see what's his name. Oh yeah, Arishem.
Hmm.
Yeah, it really seems when I was looking at that, I was like, man, that really seems like they're saying Hashem. Like
It's
what the thing
and
that
of
they're
course
doing is
they picked the creator as this like evil looking robot. He's just like a robot.
yeah,
He's
he's a sentient or something. They call him
yeah,
a sentient.
celestial. Yeah,
Yep.
like he has no really care for the earth that he's on. And what is he? And the whole purpose of Earth is that it's going to birth another celestial, but
Yep.
they end up sacrificing a celestial,
Mm-hmm.
and then so he's going to come back in judgment against them.
So
He's like, who do
wild
you
this
think the
story.
celestial that they were talking about was going to be birthed? So, and of course, in that story, it was going to be like
Yep.
Tiamat, which I want to say that's a god. Isn't that a god? I can't remember what religion they believe in Tiamat.
Is that like getting back into like Sumerian times or stuff like that, where it's like the cuneiform kind of stuff, or I can't remember honestly, or if it was something from the like Persian, Assyrian type, like Zoroastrianism and stuff.
Yeah, but of course,
Anyways,
the really interesting part too is again, so if you view this story in the way that's probably supposed to be, is this kind of Gnostic story, or not the way that we would tell you to interpret it. So their creator is represents our God. The whole point of Earth is to birth the celestial, which I would say is Christ. Is
yeah,
actually so
sounds like it.
they sacrifice the celestial, and so what Asherim, their creator, does to these Eternals, he takes them and puts them in these rings. Like he calls them back up to space, to outer space where
Hmm.
he's at, and they have these rings around them. And I really started to think about, I was like, what if that's why Saturn has a ring around it? What if why this is why some of these planets actually have, is that's what this represented? Because if you believe in biblical cosmology, you would say that these planet is not like Earth. A planet is
Hmm.
not like here. What the ancients would have viewed planets as wandering stars.
Yeah, wandering stars.
So what if they were trapped by these rings? Is that what that represents?
Wow, that's a cool take. That's a really cool take. Yeah, that's cool. I never even thought of it like
Yeah, so
that, but it,
the stars that were rebellious, they got rings around them, and that's why they're kind of trapped where they're at.
on a prison, yeah, that's wild. Yeah, because they're the ones, and you see the. Is there how many of them are there? Well, I wonder if they add extra
Well, you know
numbers
that it's
to it.
funny you say that there's 10 Eternals. Well, we're told that there is a 10th planet, Planet X, whatever.
Yep.
Well, then eventually they take Pluto away as a planet, and
Yeah.
now that's not a planet because it's too small. Even though for some reason it wasn't too small when they decided it was one. Um, yeah, I guess that would include Earth as a planet, which we don't believe
Hmm.
that Earth is
Earth is not a wandering star. No.
Earth. Earth is different than the other things, and all the other planets are named after pagan gods.
Yep, for sure.
Okay, well,
Tiamat too is they have it in Dungeons and Dragons and Godzilla. That's where I like remembered recently seeing it from the multi-headed dragon.
mhm.
Yeah. All
Okay,
right,
so we're gonna
so
read chapter 6, and then
they call
we'll
it
wrap it up.
yeah. Yeah, so now it came to be after numerous children were born to mankind, daughters were born, which were beautiful and pleasant. Then the fallen angels from the heavens took notice of these children, lusted after them, and said between themselves, "Come now, we will select for ourselves females from the posterity of mankind, so that they can bear to us posterity." Then Semyaza, who was their leader, spoke to the other angels, saying, "I fear perchance you will not be willing to perform this affair, and falsely deny these acts, so that I alone will be answerable for all these devious sins." Collectively, they responded to him and said, "Establish a contract, and we will swear to what it stipulates, and there will be curses between us in the way it is done if we deny these acts. We will not turn aside from this devious plan you have urged us to perform." After that, those who swore this oath were banished from the dwelling within heaven, rejected out of divine punishment. They descended upon Ardis, this being the summit of Mount Harmon,
Or Mount
convening.
Hermon would be like
Yeah, Mount
biblical.
Harmon would be. Yep.
Oh, by the way, it
Convening.
has a Israelis, I guess, put up a base on the top of that, and there's a UN headquarters up on Mount Hermon.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Hmm.
Convening to this lofty mountain, since they had sworn by an oath and cursed between themselves. Now these are the names regarding the angels this Semyaza leads: Urak Baramel, Baramel, Akibaal, Tamael, Ramuel, Danel, that's interesting, like Daniel, Ezekiel, that's like Ezekiel
Hmm.
too, Barakael, Asael, Amaros, Armoros, yeah, Bata'arel, Ananel, Zakel, Semsapi Beel, Sterael, that's like sterile, Tirael, Yomyael, and Azariel. Azariel. Wouldn't that be interesting if this one right here was the one who taught like the abortions and things like that? Wouldn't that be crazy?
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I mean, that's the. Well, we'll probably have to stop here today, but it does actually tell us what they taught the people.
We'll leave it for the excitement,
Hmm.
the suspense to build. These are the names that administered all rejected angels after they were banished by restraining them from being in the company of heaven. Then they took to themselves wives of the women of mankind. Fascinating. Love this book.
Yeah, but that's super fascinating. I do think that is where most people, like especially the stuff we concluded with, I feel like that's the is this the junk food portion of the Book of Enoch? Because it's like that's where most of us really instantly wanted to go because we want to talk about because there's lots of mysteries about angels, especially the fallen angels, and we want to know more about giants, and we want to
Yep.
know more about the days of Noah. So like this stuff is super interesting because this is where you get into the beginning of Genesis chapter 6, and it talks about like the things that lead up to like why God decides he needs to destroy the earth, why the hearts of men are wicked, what the things that are happen. So that's really fascinating. But then again, like you get further into Enoch, it talks about more about the apocalypse, more about biblical cosmology, and more just a lot more mysteries about kind of maybe things that are more maybe pertinent to our times.
Yeah, if you're really wanting to find some more about it too, and you have Enoch there, look into the later chapters, like chapter 69 is really interesting. That's where I think, actually, Now You See TV did a podcast way back in the day called The Five Satans, because it literally seems like, these are like, because it seems like angels would come in groups of seven, right? Like you see it like that. So if it did or something like that, they were depicting it as like Azazel, Satan, and then like the other ones that would have been part of that seraphim group or something like that. Because seraphim, I believe it means like dragon or serpent like.
Hmm. Yeah. Hmm.
But they, anyways, in those chapters there, it talks about the ones who got the watchers to conspire and leave, and then it talks about Pemuel with, taught them writing and how to believe through faith in words and instead of actually faith through their heart and different things like that. And it talks about a lot of the other things that were done. So you get right after that, when we get into chapter 7 and on, you're going to see the things that the angels taught individually, but then you actually go to their hierarchy, beyond them, that got them to conspire and do it. So, little teaser for later, but you guys can check that out yourself. It's fascinating, this whole book, especially like if you nerd out on the calendar like I did. You get into like chapter 73 and on, and you get into the luminaries, and you can still see it today. You can actually see the creation account like on If you go to March 18th, March 18th, 2022, you'll see all the luminaries come back to a perfect zero and then restart together, stars,
Mm.
moon, and sun. And it's actually, a lot of people believe in the new moon. I don't believe scripture even references new moon. I believe that means head of the season, but it's actually a full moon. Everybody's looking for the sliver, but in reality, when you look up at his beautiful clock, you see it's a full moon that I believe everything started in fullness, it seems, Adam,
Right.
everything.
Hmm.
What is it, chicken before the egg or the egg before the chicken type thing,
I think it was the chicken before the egg because God created the chicken.
Yeah, for sure. And
Yeah,
then
that
it
makes
did
more
it. So,
sense. You know, one
yeah.
thing I want to go finish with before I want to just address real quick before we or ask a question before we conclude. I think it's really weird that if you guys are not aware, it actually mentions Azazel, who's mentioned in Enoch, in was it the book of Leviticus when it's talking about
Yep.
the Day of Atonement that Aaron is given these two goats and one of them is sacrificed, but one of them all the sin and all the yuck gets put on this other goat and he's sent out to the wilderness of sin to Azazel.
Yep.
And that's it's such a weird thing. And then it tells people to not sacrifice outside the camp to goat demons. So
Mm.
what many people believe, or what Azazel represented, was a goat, and he was called the scapegoat. And the reason they called him the scapegoat is because people blamed the flood on him.
Yep.
Now, okay, so with all that being said, so some of the things that are in Enoch are kind of confirmed with the scriptures.
Mm-hmm.
What I find really interesting is, why is Azazel the scapegoat when it was like Shemyaza was the leader?
Right. It's fat. It even says later that Semyaza was the one who deceived. It'll say Hua or Chua in this text, but it's Eve. Like that's the other name
I
for
thought,
that.
I mean, in the version I've read, I thought it was, they call it Gadriel. Well,
Godriel, sorry, forgive me. Godriel was the one that did it. So you see this unification one, and you also see, but it's interesting that Azazel is the one that ascribed all sin, right? But then you got Godrail who deceived Eve and like started that process there. So it's like, I mean, I think all those things are pinnacles when it comes to like the evil that started all this deception and this kind of persuading humans to go into the wrong way. But it's pretty fascinating with what you said. Semyaza said to be the leader,
yeah,
but
why is he not the scapegoat?
isn't Azazel is the one that taught them the workings of war and everything,
Yeah,
if
well,
I'm not mistaken?
yeah, probably we'll have to address that next week because it does seem like out of all the things, the bad things that men learned, they learned them from Azazel. I wonder if Azazel could have been like I said, I've always just tried to think about this in the way that I could understand it. It's almost like was Azazel was like the real big bad. He was like Satan before
Yeah.
Satan was Satan. And
Hmm.
then later, after the flood, Azazel was put in the bottomless pit, and then he was awaiting his judgment that likely came when Christ returned, sometime in the first century. And he was judged and he was done. He's in the lake of fire, he's gone forever. But then afterwards, when after the flood, there was like it's kind of in the same way that there was this old god in the Greek mythology. There was Kronos was god before the flood, Kronos or Saturn, and then
Yep.
but he was put in Tartarus, and then so afterwards Zeus is god, is the god of gods. So I believe that Zeus is kind of your avatar for the devil, Satan, whatever his name is, Gadriel or whatever you want to
Hmm.
call him. But yeah, so it's like in the same way I always bring up Lord of the Rings now. Everybody probably gets annoyed now. But in the Tolkien mythos is there the big bad kind of evil dark lord is Morgoth or Melkor. And so he was the big bad over even Sauron. But he's put in a pit in their universe. And then so the later dark lord is Sauron. And Sauron is not the same as Morgoth. He tries to rule by deception, not by brute force, which makes sense because if Azazel is more like the god of war, he's
Yeah.
teaching men all these wicked things, and he's just more he's like more pure evil, and the devil is more cunning.
Mm-hmm.
He tries to get people to do, he like thinks he has a better way than our God, and that's
It's interesting too because Sauron is like pre-incarnate and incarnate almost. Like he's a spirit first that has to become a human. Like he has to become a human physical form. Same way that you see with Voldemort. Like, he goes away. There's this time where he's gone, and then both of them come back and have to be pulled in through these things to become incarnate, and like they actually
there's this
gain their body
process.
back.
Hmm.
Yeah, so it's kind of, but that's a really interesting take, like to think of like them as separate, because a lot of times people will take it as Satan is like this big spiritual thing that's in the spirit realm, and he goes into everything, and then that thing acts evilly, evil, and does evil based on like what he's provoking them, like with Judas and stuff like that. It's like people always think of it as Satan being just like a spirit that enters into beings and then makes them do things, but like with the way you just brought it up, that's fascinating too, because we got to look at the mythologies and stuff, because we know they're not myth. Myth actually, what myth means,
Well,
like
that's the thing is I always try to make sure people understand this, that the Greek mythology came from like that's where we get the most of mythologies, but the Greeks did not view their mythologies as fiction. Most of the time they were moral stories or they were oral traditions that were passed
yep.
down, and they did not teach
Even
them as their fantasy.
a friend of a friend used to like bust on us because he's like, only you idiot Americans believe that my ancestry is called mythology. And I was like, whoa, that was the most mind blowing thing like to ever hear, because he was like, you guys call it mythology in the West. But he was like, this is our ancestry. This is what came down from
Yeah.
us. And I'm like, whoa, that's crazy.
Yeah,
And
there's
he's like, and
people
it's,
that I remember even Brian was just talking about this. They were talking about people having ancestry and they were claiming their selves back to Saturn and Zeus.
yeah, it's over there. It's wild. And he was like, this is how it's taught to us too. It's not taught is as like mythology and that these are fictitious characters or anything. This is actually taught. And I'm not saying that every, person who's over there in like Mediterranean Greece is going to say that that's the way that it's taught. But I'm saying the people who are, obviously there's groups who are into this stuff and groups who are not. I'm sure there's regular old people from Greece who are just like, like I don't get into that. I
Yeah,
don't watch that
that's
stuff.
good. Well, I mean, it's the same way that you have people who claim to be Christians and say, "Oh, the Bible was never meant to be taken literally."
Yeah, for
They're
sure.
saying it's
Yep.
all allegory. It's all meant to be some coded message to teach you to be a good person or something like that. So there's
Yep.
people like that. Yeah, I think again, I always say that the difference is Christianity dominated the world, and now it's acceptable to believe this. It doesn't sound crazy, but it's crazy to say you believe in Zeus. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's a good example. I think that's actually good evidence that we are in the little seas and the millennial reign has come, is because me and Brian talk about that. I always thought we were just teasing. I think that'd be a fun, like, kind of short video. It'd be say, let me ask you a question. Where are all the Zeus worshippers at? Do
Yeah.
you know that his temples were buried under the ground? They had to be dug up. I think that that's pretty. You know what I'm saying? Like the idea that the world just changed on a dime and they worshipped the one true God, and then paganism was just done away with. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
pretty good evidence that there was 1,000 years,
Yep.
because they were certainly doing that in the times of Jesus, right?
Mm-hmm.
What caused them to
Yeah.
stop?
Yeah, it's pretty wild, especially the like all the stuff that had to be excavated, you know what I mean? Like it's really it's a no-brainer when you look at that, especially the cities that you always bring up, from over there that he called out, and it like never really struck me like that. That because it's still a lot of these facts. I mean, even when you're deep into this, like a lot of these facts have to be aha moments at some point where you're just sitting there and you're like, a friend like you
Yeah,
comes on and is like,
just
"Have
like
you ever
that
heard this?"
seems
And I'm
make
like,
that makes
"No,
sense, right?
no way!" Like, of course that's how it like,
So
But
where are the Zeus worshippers? In Congress, but they do it in
Congress,
secret. You know what I'm saying? I
right?
think that again, that actually, again, I think that just that little thing, just right there. There was the time where the Roman emperors either claimed to be related to Apollo or were Apollo. They had
Mm-hmm.
temples to Zeus or Jupiter. They had a temple to Artemis, all the pagan gods. And then one day they established that Christ was king, and now there is no Zeus worshippers, supposedly.
Yeah, yeah.
But the people who worship the evil one have to do it in secret. They do it kind of like a hidden in plain sight stuff, but they don't do it openly. So why not?
Seems like some of that law that was imposed during the Millennial Kingdom still exists, and like almost like their maritime stuff and everything is kind of like parallel to it, but it's like done in a way that's very like, walking on eggshells and marking their, crossing their T's
Yeah,
and dotting their
is it
I's.
possible that even not just because the general public would not accept that that's okay again, but is it almost like a thing where it's like there's Jesus ruling with a rod of iron and saying you're not going to lead these people referencing that you worship the devil.
Yeah.
Not now.
He's obviously
That time
given
is
freedom to.
past. So now
Yeah,
the devil can deceive people into worshiping him, but he cannot honestly take his throne. Actually, we should probably wrap this up, but I want to tease one thing. This won't be a tease because JT's mixtape will already come out by then. But somebody made a really interesting video the other day I saw on TikTok, and I never really made the connection. So in Revelation I think it's chapter 3, it talks about Pergamum, and that's where Satan's throne is at the time it was written. It's not there anymore. Again, there's another clue that maybe we're past the times of that time because there's not Satan's throne's not there. So there was a famous altar to Zeus that looks really similar to a throne. If you actually look at the way it's built, it almost looks like if somebody sat down on it, they could put their hands up. It looks like a throne. And so I never really thought about it. So just think about the idea that all these places in the 7 churches, they all got buried. They all needed to be excavated. So now think about the spiritual significance of the fact that in the late 19th century, early 20th century, the Germans dug that up and then took the pieces and assembled that throne back in their capital city of Berlin. And I never really I thought about it kind of in the whole Indiana Jones type way, of like they're looking for these relics of spiritual power. But to me, it's like Satan's throne was buried under the ground. They dug it up and then they went and put it back together. And I was thinking like, wow, that really hits hard kind of with the little season.
It really does. That's a really good one when you look at it like that. All the stuff
it's like the devil literally says, "Go get my throne. It's time. It can't stay in that desolate place anymore. Dig it up, bring it, and put it into one of the most powerful cities, the center of power in the world at that time."
And you think about it, if this guy has all this knowledge from thousands of years, and sure, he was put away for 1,000 years, who knows what the extent of his knowledge was to then, but still, when he would come out, you would think he would have some kind of like reference point for like, hey, this is here, this is there, this is there, this is there. I think, you know what I mean? And that's why I think you would see the kind of tapping onto what I said earlier about that frantic, like trying to, go through the whole earth and just scour everything and find this, find that, all these different, whether they're talking about the Ark of Gabriel or this or different things that they, took to Antarctica, that like whatever truth there is behind those things, it really seems like there was a kind of repopulation of sorts is what a lot of people talk about. But the other side is whether you're talking about conquistadors, you're talking about like Knights Templars, you're talking about all these things where they just went all over the earth, like, searching and seeking for these treasures. But what, who's commanding that treasure fleet to go out and get them?
Yeah, like why would there be this weird time where it was a time to go collect relics of the past? If we're taught the way we're taught, well, if what we're taught is correct, that we have this linear progression of man, how did all this stuff ever get lost in the first place?
Yeah, right.
And it was like this very specific time that, of course, all these secret societies are chasing down these relics. So why weren't they chasing down the relics earlier or preserving them? What happened in the middle?
Very good point.
Anyways, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Yeah, hopefully we'll get into, probably next time we'll start with the Book of Enoch first, or maybe not. Who knows what we're going to do. But I hope you guys appreciate this, guys. Once again, please check out Modern Roots Life if you guys want to support this podcast. Appreciate you guys. Love y'all. God bless.
Take care, guys. God bless.
everyone left me, everyone deserted me, Jesus was always there. When everyone hated me and walked away, Jesus never walked away.